It should be another draft physics video production. Should have cleaned the blackboard, but hell with it. Anyway, comments. It's probably enough to talk about with these two comments in specific. So anyway, I'll save this one for later. And do this one first. So, Stig Matrix. Annoying, rude asshole. Whatever. Coils don't store electric charge by themselves. Well, again, I didn't say they stored electric charge. They're storing the magnetic field created around them, okay, as their atoms are magnetized. So, let's see, back to the drawing board. And just to state that when electricity travels through a wire, what it's doing to the wire is changing the atoms. The atoms change. So the point being made is when current goes through a wire, the atoms change shape. So I could argue they go from looking like them, squares, to looking like rectangles. Not a density, same amount of density to the atom. So yes, so the atoms go from squares, let's say, something looking squarish, to something longer. So they change shape. And whenever they have to change back shape again, that's essentially a moving magnetic field. All right, and it will allow pressure to move through the wire. Now, the pressure could go either way. It just kind of depends on the circumstance. But the point is there's a lag. I can turn the current off that's changing the shape, and all the ones that are changed have to change back to their regular shape, their comfortable shape. And as they do that, they also create a residual current. So any conductor is a storage device a little bit. And so if you have a coil of wire, yes, you have a lot of wire, and so you have some potential for that wire, once you stop pushing current, to go back to being relaxed. When you're pushing current into it, you could say it moves, it changes. And when the current stops, it changes back. And the changes back will be a current. Could be in the opposite direction, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, it will be movement of electrons. Importantly, if I put a core in here, then the atoms of the core, just like the magnetic atoms of a piece of iron, they're all going to change their domains. They're all going to line up, right? So they're all going to line up, line up, line up. And when they go to disalign, that's going to be a changing magnetic field, okay? Their magnetism is going to be changing, turning off. And that turning off of their magnetism is going to create a impulse in the wire that's going to, changing their atoms. And those changes is going to produce a current. So the more iron I put inside the core, the longer it takes to get all that residual change out of the system. So when you put the core in, and you have the coil of wire, and then you charge it up, so to speak, with a current, you change all of that matter, and then when you turn the current off, all of that matter has to change back again. That was my argument. I didn't say this was a great storage device, that it stored so much more than charge. So this is storing magnetic changes, the shape changes to the atoms, where a capacitor is merely changing the surface electrons. So the surface electrons, their pressure, these being higher pressure, the closer together, these electrons further apart, that change in pressure to make these two equal again, okay, is going to be discharge, it's much quicker, just flies out. That's why you use capacitors to do high frequencies and all kinds of stuff, because it's really fast. And this is really slow, because these are atoms moving, these are just electrons moving, changing their position. Electrons change their position faster than atoms can change their shape, so to speak. Alright, anyway. Don't store electric charge by themselves. Well, again, the point is the inductor is storing magnetic character, so to speak, magnetization, and capacitors are storing electric charge. It's possible a tiny amount of delayed discharge from a coil only because of potential length of the coiled wire. That's exactly the point made. Yes, it does store energy, and the more matter you put in the coil, the more energy it can store. All right, but it would be so minuscule, it's negligible. Well, you say it's negligible. I'm saying it's not negligible. It's a tiny amount of voltage to light an LED. So, I mean, current. I mean, not tiny, but appreciably not huge. Unless it's a current path and unless it's in the current path of an unusually prior to a capacitor. I don't know. So anyway, let's just go to the electric boom clip. So he's claiming there's a capacitor in this circuit. There's no capacitor in the circuit. He took the adapter apart. He pulled the coil out. Now, he didn't mention that he put the iron inside the coil. So that was a little deceptive to just imply that the inductor all by itself could light the LED. Obviously, the metal is making the LEDs, is creating enough current because you're storing a bunch of atoms that have to change. So the atoms have to change from being magnetized to being demagnetized. The demagnetization of the iron will cause a current in the wire and light the LEDs. And it will light them when he has eliminated the current in the wire. So he shorts the circuit, the LEDs don't light because they're just getting 1.5 volts. But when he removes the wire, then the LEDs get more than 9 volts because now they're getting the voltage created by the magnetized metal. It's clear. There's no misunderstanding or misinterpretation. No capacitor in this circuit. None. It's not there. Show me where it is. There's a coil of wire and the metal interior used to create a density, of atoms to change, but it's the same thing. It's the same effect. It just adds more atoms to have to go through the change process, so you get more of a current to light the LEDs. That's it. That's the only reason why the metal stuff is there, to increase the current so the LEDs will light. But the principle is the same, with or without. You piece of shit. Okay. Anyway, capacitors do most certainly store a charge, especially in an electronic circuit. Okay, so again, there's no capacitor in the circuit. Now, you might claim when he's using the full adapter, there's a tiny capacitor in there merely to take the spikes out of the converted current. So they're converting AC into DC as the function of the adapter. When it creates its DC, it's messy, so there's a capacitor to smooth it out a little bit. But the point is when he uses the coil, there's no capacitor in the circuit. And it worked. Shit. I mean, you just need to pay attention a little bit to see that's quite obvious. Alright, capacitors do mostly store, the smoothing out of current you referred to with us capacitors is based on the electric charge reservoir storage function of an electrolytic polarized capacitor. Right, it doesn't mean it has the capacity to create a new voltage. Capacitors don't increase the voltage. So what's increasing the voltage? The magnetic core in the inductor is increasing the voltage. That's what's making it capable of lighting the LEDs. The capacitor will only be storing 1.5 volts. That's all it can give back is 1.5 volts. It can't light 3 LEDs. So you're completely missing the point. But even bipolar capacitors in low voltage circuits can hold a static charge until there's a draw from the negative side of it or a resistor to ground is present solely to discharge the capacitor. So again, this has nothing. There's no capacitor in the circuit. So it's not an issue. It's not the subject. I realize how smart you are, Gary, about a lot of things, but you're wrong about coil storing energy. So I'm saying to you, fuck you. Clearly it's doing it. And clearly the coil with an iron core stores a lot more energy because there's a lot more atoms that are going to be demagnetized by the absence of the current. So you can say I'm wrong, but you're fucking wrong. And overtly wrong. You're not like a little bit wrong. You're just completely fucked out of your head wrong. I mean, how do you think? Look, they're called push-pull circuits, right? When you have a capacitor and an inductor. They're called the push-pull. Why? Well, because the capacitor discharges its extra energy very fast, and the inductor discharges it very slow. And that's why they end up push-pulling, is because when one is giving it back, the other is storing it, and when the other one's giving it back, the other one's storing it. Shit, for brain. Okay, anyway, unless you are mistaking energy or current for electrons, which are present already in all conductive materials. Well, obviously the electrons are moving. And when the electrons are moved to a different position, their energy is different. That's the nature of energy, is basically creating imbalances. That is, by moving electrons around, you're changing where the walls are and how much is reflecting off of them and all of that crap, which are present already in all conductive materials and only move through metal with a positive and negative electrical charge applied. Well, they're always moving, so that's just pointless. But and the point is, in AC current, they're not moving anywhere. They're just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, I'm finding it difficult to believe that you are so sure about something you're completely wrong on. So I'll say the same to you. And unfortunately, I won't be able to say it's rare because I don't know what your track record is, asshole. But you are a rude fuck. And you're wrong. You've totally misinterpreted the statement made in the video and misinterpreted my interpretation of it. There's no capacitor in this circuit. The very truth is that when he cuts the current off, there will be energy that's going to light the LEDs. Where do you think it came from? It can't come from the battery because the battery's not in the circuit. So where did it come from? It has to come from the inductor. The circuit, the battery only has 1.5 volts. Obviously, more than 1.5 volts is going to end up at the other side of that LED. Where's it coming from? Where do you think it's coming from? Except for the energy stored in the iron inside the core of the inductor. Okay. There's nothing else to say. That'll be enough. So anyway, change your attitude or fuck off. You know, you didn't prove your case. You didn't show how what Electric Boom was saying was untrue. I mean, he's the one pointing it out to you. I mean, clearly, he removes he stops there from being a closed circuit. Okay, he opens the circuit and the LEDs light. Shit. All right. So this was kind of off subject, and I sort of did what was requested, which was another economics video, so blah, blah, blah. But thank you for the kind words and such. All right, so this is something about, oh yeah, the old science forums that didn't pay any attention, so I guess I'll read some of this shit. I have a rather similar experience with another website, so I can easily empathize. It is amazing how such unprincipled people get to have moderator rights. Yes, so the forums are just run by people who are afraid of certain arguments because they know they're good arguments, and they just censor them because they don't want to deal with the fact that, you're finding fault with some of our axioms and our declarations. So it's just like religious people just saying, well, we're not going to let somebody talk about fossils and evidence. You know, we don't want to hear about that. Which they then recklessly use to censor thought. As far as I can say, I don't know if they're censoring thought, but yeah, I mean, quite obviously they're quote mining. They're trying to just evade conversations that where they don't get to mock somebody, where somebody might be mocking them. They're just one way. You know, I'll mock you, but you can't mock me. I'll interrogate your physics, but you can't interrogate mine. Again, just as a demonstration of this website, how many times I'm interrogated on my physics versus how many times somebody answers one of my questions. I never get an answer to a question, ever. Okay, as far as I see, you did nothing wrong, nor were you more hostile than the others there. Well, of course, exactly. They start insulting, you start bantering. Okay, so, if you're going to call me a fat face, I'm going to call you a fat ass, blah, 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 blah. But yes, clearly I didn't do a damn thing out of line, and they just deleted me because they didn't want to have the conversation. I used to debate this one specific, admittedly taboo subject on the image forums for years. That I still would, but can't because I get banned straight away. The whole subject has been banned, actually. Yeah, so exactly. They just ban subjects. You're just not allowed to interrogate their physics. So if you want to have a discussion about wave-particle duality and the sensibility of it, they won't let you have the conversation because they know conceptually it's stupid. Many people think it is because of me, not only I can make my argument, that isn't even extreme on the subject, but everyone else is denied the conversation also. Well, that was clearly the point of I posted in the not even regular forum, right? It's in the, well, can we discuss this thing, like a suggestion area? So it wasn't even a thing, and I even stated clearly, I just want to have the conversation with people who are interested in fundamental physics. I mean, it's, we can just narrow it, It's okay to segregate it into some little pile where almost nobody can see it except people looking for it. That would even be okay with me, right? So it wasn't like I was trying to shove it into their main board. It wasn't even on the main board. It was just a profile of who I was and what I was interested in. And they couldn't even accept my existence in stating I'm interested in talking about your fundamental assumptions. They won't even let you say that. Okay, what is most grotesque is that the website advertises itself as some sort of haven for free speech. Well, yes, I mean, quite obviously they all do and they all aren't. I know all this might sound incredulous. Surely I must be doing something wrong. Yeah, well, you just can't react at all. So the only, well, even if you don't, it probably in theory isn't going to work. Because even if you don't fight back, defend yourself at all, just let them call you an asshole and an idiot and all this other crap and blah, blah, blah. And don't, question their integrity for making such accusations. I mean, like I say, even if you don't fight back at all, they will find some way to say this isn't of interest to us. In spite of the fact that every time those threads are active, they're very popular. So that's the joke of it, right? They say, no, we're not interested, yet they're very popular threads. So that's the funny part. But no, I only argue, admittedly with rather lengthy posts, and this is exactly why I can so easily relate. The thing to understand about the anonymous image boards is that they have a high concentration of fascists these days, and I mean literal Jew-hating bigot fascists. Yeah, well, anyway. Consequently, many end up as moderators too, and out of the window goes their supposed love for free speech when their political enmity would have any use for it. Okay, I'm not sure what explains the love of censorship of these people in that science form, but it might have something to do with their hatred for new ideas. No, it has to do with the fact that they know what they believe is shaky. It's vulnerable. It is. Their kids are actually ugly. And they just keep saying, look, they're going to be models someday, and they're beautiful. And as soon as somebody says anything about, you're counting on that, you're going to put that money in the bank, ain't going to happen, buddy. They don't want to hear it. They just don't want to hear about how they're doomed to failure. Their theory is not solid at all. And they just don't want to hear that, because that means, I've wasted 30 years of my life believing in Bozo and he doesn't exist. Or boson. Yeah. That challenge to their precious status quo. Having followed your videos, it is clear how these people regard it utter heresy to question mainstream science. Look, there's lots of reasons for them to have some arrogance in the sense that there are, unfortunately, dissidence comes like revolutions, right? There's revolutionaries, like even you could say the Democratic Party, right? I mean, yeah, you can say, hey, yeah, let's fuck bigots, okay, yeah, let gay people do whatever they want to do. I mean, yeah, I don't really think men should be going to bathrooms and, girls' bathrooms and shit, but whatever. Let's have some kind of rational social policy so people don't have to live on the street, but let's not reward, but they'll go too far, right? So then they'll start saying, look, I got nothing against an immigrant as long as they speak and, learn how to speak English and shit. I got no issues. But then they'll tell that, there's some of them, the wackies, will just say, open the borders and love the criminals and, and you're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then they'll like start saying we should tax people to pay for people's sex change operations. We should do no, this stuff doesn't make any sense. There's lots of other problems in the world. Why are these getting all this attention? So you say these radicals are tinfoil hatty, okay? So you get all these tinfoil hatters in the club and you're just like, how can I go to the club meetings anymore? Because they're embarrassing me, The Democratic Party is an embarrassment. It's just an embarrassment. The whole notion of social justice, great words, social justice. Yeah, let's have that. But their notion of it is, give me a free income. I don't want to work. I want to play video games. I mean, their notion of what they're supposed to be for, what justice even means, is so wacky that they just make everybody look stupid. So yes, the dissident community is full of whack jobs. So as I've stated, there probably should be an organization of dissidency that states, look, you can go this far, no further. We have integrity as dissidents. We're going to make real arguments, not fake flat earther arguments. Okay, we're not going to cheat the facts. We're not going to quote mine the evidence. We're not going to play these games. I've solved all the equations. I've purified Maxwell's equations. I've done this. All these claims these fucking dissidents make, and there's no evidence they've done any of this crap. My model does everything just perfectly, except, I can't explain how a magnet works either. That kind of horse shit. And so, so they have some right, okay, to mock the other party. But what they're mocking is the actual principle of, well, shouldn't you, as scientists, just as much as you will critique the opposing theory, shouldn't you be willing to be critiqued? And that's the part where they show their duplicitous hypocrisy, because you show up with real evidence, as I did, making a real argument about how I can demonstrate that your theory doesn't work, okay, that the lens is the wrong shape, shit like that. I can make real arguments, and I want to hear your real explanation for how that argument is invalid. And that's what they run. They just pretend that's a flat earth argument when it's not a flat earth argument. All right. So, thanks for sharing. All right. So, Joseph. So, this is the guy on the subject of bringing up the entanglement crap and telling me to well, how do you explain that? So, I can just say your attitude was kind of like, well, gee, how do you explain all this great evidence they have when, if you look at it yourself, it's not great evidence. It's not like this piece of chalk is white. They're not making some kind of claim that's easily seen by the evidence. They're making a claim that's really hard to see if you try to look at the evidence. It's not overtly visible because their evidence is, well, we did this experiment with this magic crystal that creates entangled photons in the first place. And then, so come on. Thanks for your replies. I will strive to understand them. I have no theory and would say I am nothing and know nothing. Well, that's that's more of the exaggeration that ends up everywhere. I mean, obviously you're not a know-nothing. You're interested in these subjects. You have some literacy, okay, in what experiments exist and some notions. So, no point in saying that. I'm not trying to shoot you down. Well, I'm just saying, in a sense, your tone was in the same form as an effort to force me, oblige me to be on the defensive. Well, how do you explain this? That's the kind of statement somebody makes when they got a big pile of evidence that they're going to try to dump it on you. So it had exactly the form of somebody trying to do exactly that, to say I'm wrong, shoot me down with a big pile of evidence. That was your tone, clearly. I'm not trying to understand by inquiry. Well, that doesn't even make sense. I am trying to understand by inquiry. Okay, well, you have to inquire in a better form than, how do you explain this? Because that sounds like one of the little petty naysayers. That doesn't sound like somebody who's just inquiring. Okay. So, fine. All right. Perv action. Don't know what to say. Anyway, okay. Premise. I tried to model atoms out of red and blue matter. Well, look, we've already described what it is: electrons and protons. So, so out of electrons and protons. Yeah, I'm saying those are the only two elements you have to worry about. There's no muons, there's no puons, there's no neutrinos, there's no gluons, there's none of this other crap in the basic function of an atom. The real functions are just electrons and protons. That's matter. Obviously, I gave them magnet-like. So again, they're supposed to have charge-like, and systematically inverse properties of attraction and repulsion. So I'm just saying the magnet is what happens when you have a dipole situation, which is, sort of a kind of a complexification, right? Because the idea is that the magnet essentially is still energetic, in that in the field, the electron wants to go one way and the proton wants to go exactly the opposite way in the same field. Well, obviously the dipole isn't doing that. The magnet doesn't fly apart, right? So obviously they're doing something, in the sense that a proton will attract an electron. Now, obviously they can't be moving towards each other when they're a magnet, right? So in theory, the magnet would be the electron and the proton. In theory. And the idea would be is they're still moving towards each other, okay, even though they're not moving. Just like we're in gravity and we're accelerating, but we don't see us accelerating. It's the same kind of principle. So these circumstances of free electron and free proton and magnet are very different circumstances. You can't just talk about them like, I modeled them like this and this at the same time. You can't be a dipole and you can't be individual charges at the same time. Okay, that's their theory. They think electrons are dipoles. Okay, they don't think an electron is a negatively charged electron. They think it's some kind of magnetic dipole that's swinging around doing different magnetic faces. I mean, they literally think the electron has a north and a south. Even though the whole idea of the electron, how could the electron repel another electron then if it had a south and a north? Because, yes, they would repel if their south poles are facing, wouldn't the electron just spin around, do north-south, and then they would just attract? So it doesn't make any sense. All right. At 4 protons and electrons, beryllium. So beryllium has 9 protons and electrons. So you got that wrong, right? Because again, neutrons are real things. Neutron is a proton and an electron. All right. So it's not 4, it's 9. 9 protons, 9 electrons. I already struggled keeping track of the implied pushes and pulls. Well, I don't know how you're struggling. I thought, you made a model. What does a model mean? So the model is that you decided that you're going to figure out, okay, how beryllium, atomic structure of beryllium. Now, I've made the point that proton, electron, proton is a configuration that allows them to be really close together. So if you put an electron between 2 protons, all the energy from the protons leaks out the electron, all the energy from the electron leaks out the protons. So that way you have the electron energy, we'll draw as a squiggle, coming out of the protons. And you have the proton energy, we'll do that with straight lines, coming out of the electrons. Okay, something like that. That would be their arrangement. Now they can be spinning, they can be doing all kinds of things. But anyway, so this is how you build a nucleus. So if I put another proton here, I can use up 2 more of the protons. All right, proton, proton. But the problem is then I have to move the in and out this way, right? So this energy that was here now has to go into the 3rd dimension and do the in and out thing. So now I have 4 protons on 1 electron. Now, so I'm just building the nucleus, right? I haven't gotten to the 4 electrons out here. So we can argue that there's 4 electrons out here that are structurally connected to that nucleus. I don't know if you can see that one out there, but anyway. All right, so what have I got? I got 5 electrons used now. So I got to still use 4 more electrons, and I still got to, so I could put another electron here, and I could put another electron here. So that gets me up to 6 electrons, right? And then I could have another proton even right out here. Another proton out here. Okay, so how many protons? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so I still got to get a couple more in there, and I got to use 2 more electrons, right? I got 1, 2, 3, and I need to use 1 more electron. So anyway, so what you're doing is trying to find a geometry, but the nucleus is going to be made out of this arrangement, okay? This PEP, that PEP arrangement is going to be the key to it, and it probably goes like this. It has 3 PEP kind of connections, blah blah blah. And then, the rest is the electrons, the free electrons. But anyway, there's a geometry. So you're saying you've mastered the geometry. You know how to arrange them so it's stable. So this is like arranging little magnets, and if you had free space, theoretically you could put 2 magnets in a place. I could put I could put a negative magnet here, a pole, and I could put a positive, a negative, the same pole here, here, and here, and I could play, the opposite. I could put the opposite one here, okay, and have the opposite polarity. Well, anyway, it's just balancing the fields, but it's kind of complicated. And we already know that all these atoms are made under high pressure. So very high pressure is where they're shaped and made to be durable. And they survive in low pressure, and that's why we call them the elements. But, I'm sorry, the thing that you think you've mastered all of that and figured out exactly the relationship between how much pressure is hitting the electron and how big it is relative to the density of the pressure. So there's a certain amount of pressure per density or size of these objects. And you've already figured all that out too, because that's going to make all of this arrangement happen. Is how much, if you have to get all those pressure, you have to get all of those relationships right. That's what the constants are made out of. That's what that, that famous constant 137 or whatever it is, right? That's what it is. It's a constant kind of describing what the relationship between the density of the force is and the size of the objects being moved by the force, the electrons and protons. Anyway, let's see. At 4 protons and electrons, I already struggled keeping track of the implied pushes and pulls. Right, so I struggled where? In your brain? Trying to imagine it in your brain? But I ran into another problem, which I'll phrase as a question. Well, I imagine you're going to run in lots of problems if you think you can model this geometry just automatically. Like you can just build Godzilla out of Legos, really easy or something. Without any knowing any proportions and sizes or anything else. It's probably not a good example, but it's like playing a piano or something. This isn't going to be something where you can just say it doesn't have rules. Music has rules. Well, this has rules, and you have to kind of understand the rules before you can sit there and arrange the notes. Anyway, how sure are you about the tendency of electrons being on the outside? Well, it seems the only possible way you can charge the surfaces of things, conductors, everything seems to would fail colossally if the electrons were inside the matrix of the atoms. It seems you could blow up atoms really simple. It'd be really easy to destroy atoms if it was mixed. So I guess the argument would be the durability of the atom is evidence. And second, all the experiments sort of indicate, this negative on the outside, positive on the inside relationship. So how sure? I'm pretty sure. My thought experiment, so again, you can't do it as a thought experiment, so that's just silly. You're telling me you can figure out how to arrange a bunch of magnets so you have equalized repulsion, right? So I put a certain strength of magnet, pausing for a moment. All right, back. In my thought experiment, that just didn't emerge. Okay, beryllium atoms aren't going to just emerge. No atom is going to just emerge. Okay, if they were that easy to make, we would just make atoms all the time. We just shove protons into electrons, make lots of atoms, be simple. First, you have to create the environment, okay, in which it can be cooked. They can evolve. So they evolve out of a clustering of these atomic bits. And then the atomic bits make the neutrons, and then the atomic bits, collect and start forming different things. But it has to be in an environment we know that isn't the common environment. Alchemy can't take place in common atmosphere. All right. Easily take place. What did emerge was a lot of bar magnets comprising the atom through and through. So yes, well, that's all the atom is going to be made out of, is relationships between protons and electrons. So it's always going to be bar atoms. But the point is I'm just adding the other one at the other end. Electron, proton, electron, proton, electron, electron. SOS or OSS. I mean, it's always kind of funny, like when you're sending an SOS signal in Morse code. Why doesn't it sound like an OSO signal, right? That would be kind of a funny joke. Hey, I'm getting an OSO signal. What does that mean? Yeah. But anyway. So, what did emerge was a lot of bar magnets. Well, yeah, that's the first electron-proton going towards each other, but more complex geometry can form around that. Uneven bar magnets. Bar magnets with a north and then two south ends this way, and then a north with two south ends this way. So I mean, it's it can be more complex than that. Even when I arbitrarily skewed electrons towards the outside, so I don't know what you did. I have no idea, and you want me to critique or answer your questions about what you did as your thought experiment. Did I overlook something? Well, yes, of course. That's right. You've overlooked something. That, like gravity, you can't just sit there and say, well, I'll bend the fabric a certain amount. Because I don't know what amount. Because I don't know what G is. And then I'll duplicate with the Earth model, right? The Earth revolving around the Sun model. Well, until you get G right, until you bend the fabric just the right amount, until you create a force that's exactly proportional to the amount of mass the Earth has, then your model will fail and your Earth will keep crashing into the Sun, and it'll keep doing it over and over. It'll fly past the Sun. It'll do all kinds of things. And you'll be like, well, why isn't it working? Well, that's because you have to get it exactly right for it to work. Shit, you should know that. Which leads to, see, it puts these in bold. You're just playing some kind of jackass here, okay? Sorry, but this is just kind of bullshit. I did your model and it didn't work. Fuck you. You didn't do anything. Could the atom structure overall be more of a purple mush of bar magnets? The atom itself is going to be... I mean, look, anytime there's a proton and an electron in relationship to each other, right? Here's a proton, here's an electron. I could put another electron over here. These are magnets right here, okay? I've already made two magnets. Just by putting electrons and protons in the universe, I have already created a magnet. This is a magnet. This is a magnet, okay? So anytime electrons and protons have a relationship with each other, that means this is going to be more red and this is going to be more blue. I mean, duh. Duh, 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 duh. God damn it. The point is from a distance, it's going to be purple. Shit. Let's see. Could the atom structure be more of a purple mush of bar magnets? Of course it could. That's what a neutral atom would be. And the atoms that are not neutral, the ones like iron, obviously have a tendency to be a little more electron-y over there and a little more proton over there. A little more red here, a little more blue there. That's why they align to a charged field. Oh, shit. Anyway, purple mush rather than a Tootsie Pop, whatever that is. Blue surrounding a red center. So again, you're just not getting it. It's not about the atom is the center of an atom. An atom is going to have polarity on it. It's going to have faces. Okay, so the atom can have spatial faces. That is, if the atom structure really is, okay, you have this positive center and then you have these orientations of electrons. Obviously, from this point of view, it's a positive atom. From this point of view, it's a negative atom. From this point of view, it's a negative atom. And all you have to do is have a proportional amount of positives and negatives for overall the atom to be called neutral. It's not really neutral. It really has a specific geometry, and that's when it does connect to another atom, it will connect on the specific geometry. That is, it will connect where this positive is the strongest, okay, because it'll fit with the electrons of the other atom, and and then they'll share. Sharing an electron just means you take this electron here, and both of the atoms will use it for the same purpose. So so you'll connect the two atoms with one electron, or you can connect the two atoms with two electrons. If this atom swung over here, then it's connected with two atoms, and it creates a new shape, a molecule, a molecular increase in its compound. Well, it's not a compound until you put another kind of atom in there. But I mean, obviously, that's how it connects. I mean, some atoms connect really like a hydrogen and stuff. They stick to each other. They create these connected atoms easier. So I would argue that in the case of hydrogen and simpler atoms, they don't have their geometry is still in linear form, in a sense that they got a positive and a negative, and what they're really doing is just lining up their positive and the negative, right? So that's all they're doing, right? So they like to be in this two atom form of a molecule. It's still called hydrogen, but it's a molecular change in the sense that this atom is very different than this single, molecular hydrogen. All right, more provoke. Then I wondered, could it be that the two kinds of force are not whirring about in space natively, and only get their color properties upon being filtered? No, it doesn't make any sense. Sorry. Then you would have real imbalance in the universe. Then you wouldn't have conservation anymore, right? There has to be conservation of red and blue. If you don't conserve red and blue, then the universe could get very imbalanced and very wacky, because there could be a bunch of extra blue force and absolutely no red force and all that kind of thing. And it really can't work that way. For there to be consistency in these constants, there has to be a constancy of color. You can't destroy it. You can't destroy the energy. You can't destroy the orientation. The negative stuff is always negative. The positive stuff is always positive. Oh, shit. Continuing that thought. Oh, wait. Here we go. Filtered. Kind of like with polarization. Polarization doesn't change the orientation. It just segregates it. That's what the magnet is doing. It's segregating it. It comes in purple. It just says blue go that way, red go that way. Nothing is changed. Just the path is changed. What direction it goes is changed. kind of, so anyway, continuing that thought, forget about it. Without a magnetized medium to continue that trend, the distinct color properties do get less over distance, right? They don't really get less over distance. It's just that they get diluted over distance. The regular force is doing purple, right? The regular universe is purple, 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 purple. You have a little bit of blue, blue, extra, and red, red. Well, the little bit, as it travels, is going to get diluted by all this purple stuff. And so, yes, you're not going to be able to see the blue end and the red end. So just with headlights, even at a distance, you only see one headlight. Obviously, if you made them red and blue, you'd still be in trouble, and you'd just see one purple. So yes, at a distance, the two headlights lose their specialness, whatever. You lose there's so little density, okay, that you're losing the distinction. Distance, right? That could also speak to the color being dependent on the filter's behavior, not vice versa. So again, You're saying this doesn't work, we need to fix it, and you never tested whether it works or not. You just said, oh, here's my first try at big G, and I got the number wrong, and therefore the Earth crashed into the sun, therefore forget the theory. Let's come up with some other theory. No, I don't need another theory. It works. The theoretical viability is real. And you're just doing it so badly and saying, there, I can't play. Look, I picked up a trumpet and I can't make any music out of it, so the whole theory's wrong. No, the theory's not wrong. Your use is wrong. All right. Again, kind of makes sense that the lens of polarization, again, kind of makes sense, though, the lens of polarization. I don't know what that could mean, so who knows. Could also speak for the color being dependent on the filter's behavior and not vice versa. Again, the color is the color. The filter filters the colors. What you're saying doesn't even make any sense. Vice versa? What's the vice versa? The filter puts the colors back? I don't even know what that means. Again, kind of makes sense through the lens of polarization. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't. For example, initially via tipping point and then via snowballing. What the fuck are you talking about? Which exaggerates the tipping effect in two clear directions influences and keeping them locked in. I have no idea. The tipping point argument is just so obvious. This has nothing to do with snowballs. This has nothing to do with double forces or anything like that. We know it's quanta, and we know the quanta aren't on top. There aren't two quanta sitting in this. There's not quantum mechanics. It really doesn't mean that they're superimposed on top of each other. Even they don't believe that. Oh, this is a double quanta. No, it isn't. There's no snowballs. All right. All there is periods that things swing at. And if I want to put energy into a system, a pendulum swinging, okay, the only way I can put energy in is to, because if I put enough energy in, if I get it to go this far, it breaks off its string and flies free. Well, how do I do that? Well, if I put the energy in, when it's going towards me, I'm not going to get anywhere. So I obviously have to put the energy in when it's moving away from me. And the idea is to get it to go far up here, I'm going to have to put two pieces of energy at the right frequency. That is, both of them are going to have to go in when the pendulum swings this way. So the pendulum swings this way, energy goes in. The pendulum swings back, no energy. Pendulum swings back this way, energy goes in. Okay, the quanta hit. So it has to be at a frequency that adds energy to the system to force the electron out. No, it's not even, this isn't even complicated, and you're screwing it up. Fuck. So I know this is some form of I'm playing along, but you're playing along in a way that you're making it just like you're making it sound like it's confusing. You're making it sound like it's difficult. The concept is really easy to understand. Why there's an inverse relationship, why there's attraction and repulsion. It's just a simple concept. It's so frickin' simple. One things are able to create perpetual reflection between them. Okay, everything goes back and forth, and they get more and more repulsive. The closer I bring them, the less repulsive, the further away I bring them, because there's a thing inside bouncing back and forth. That will happen. That will obey the laws of charge. Okay, and the other effect is that, you put the two things next to each other, and everything that hits this thing goes this way, and everything that hits this thing goes this way, so nothing gets trapped between them. There's no pressure maintained, and there's no access for pressure. All the pressure going this way can't get in here to hit this surface. None of the pressure going this way can get in here to hit this surface. So this surface becomes a kind of vacuum. And the closer they get, the more of a vacuum it is, because nothing tangential can get in either. So there's no source of energy. The closer they are, the more stronger this vacuum gets of energy. So there's your two inverse principles of attraction and repulsion. That's the only thing that has to be solid here for this to be theoretically understandable. I just have to account for two phenomena: why they attract and why they repel. And if you just have two different forces that do opposite things when they hit the opposite polarity objects, it works. 2 + 2 physics. And you're just making it you're saying, I want it to work, I want to make every atom in the universe, and I want to make every event in the universe, and I want to make them all now. Well, you can't do that, because obviously the universe did evolve, and the subtle arrangements that work are only 100. There's less than 100 atoms that are durable, that can possibly exist. I could put them in my hand and they would exist, right? Some of the ones would burn right through my hand. Some will explode. Some will do all kinds of things because they're not terribly stable. So there's 50 stable form of atom that's durable, that can be fucked with, and it keeps its shape. In the whole universe, 50 of them, shithead. And you think you're going to figure out how to build those right now. You're going to build the bridge that'll stand up, right? You're going to build the bridge, whatever, name it, the Golden Gate Bridge. And you're never going to go to engineering school, and you're never going to learn stresses, and you're never going to learn anything, and you're going to get it right the first time. No, you're not. It's going to take a little bit of work to engineer it. So, thanks, but no thanks. This is not helpful. Doing a simulation badly is not what I need. A thought experiment badly. So, till the next time. Yeah, there's so much work. As I explained before, we know there's this subtle, event in physics. It's, just very subtle. We know this simple stuff happens, that charges repel, right? So I have an electron and an electron, and they repel each other by a constant, a very specific rule, no problem. Proton and electron, we know they attract, very specific rule of how strong the attraction is. Okay, so we know we have that, but then we also have this motor force, where we know that, in certain circumstances, when you have a conductor and these electrons are being pushed by current, that is, the atoms are being shaped by current, that, this third kind of relationship happens, where if I create an arrangement of proton and electron, and electron, let's say, that there's going to be this choice made between this electron moving this way or this electron moving this way, that there's this capacity to make the energy going this way either go this way, this way, this way, or this way, okay, that there's more than one choice for which way the right turn is, the turn. And so we have the third option, of where you have current going this way, you put a field going this way, and the energy goes up or down. It goes into a dimension that isn't involved with energy moving through it. So the dimension that doesn't have energy in it is the one where the motion takes place, and I would argue obviously the reflected energy is released. So, but that's all. I mean, it's not terribly complicated, but you have to admit there's some subtle rules running the show. So, I mean, I can say 2 + 2 + 2 physics, but there's really +3 physics because there is this third reaction. It's still a right turn, right? I mean, this is like I can turn right, left, okay? And in the real universe, though, that's the same as saying I'll turn up. You know, right, left don't mean it. Right, left, up, down don't mean anything when you're not in gravity, right? So if you're not in gravity, up, down, left, right doesn't mean anything. So from a atomic bits perspective, it doesn't mean anything to turn right going up or to turn right going sideways. All right, anyway. Yeah, we read all that. Okay. All right, so that's enough. So till the next time and such. Till forth and what.